Welcome to today's webinar, Crucial Conversations, Mastering the Art of Difficult Conversations, hosted by the National Association of Emergency Medical Technicians and sponsored by Safe Tech Solutions. Safe Tech Solutions guides individuals, organizations, communities, and government toward creating reliable, sustainable, and high-quality emergency medical services. Thank you, Safe Tech Solutions, for advancing the EMS profession. I am delighted to introduce you to today's speaker, Aarron Reinert, and his panelist, Ben Wasmund. For some background on our talented presenters, please view the speaker bio on your resources tab. Welcome, Aarron and Ben.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for jumping on this conversation. And would like to begin by connecting what we're going to talk about today with some of the conversations we've had previously. And for more detail about those, please look at the previous webinars on the particular topics. But today is part of these 10 conversations that we've talked about. And we're specifically going to talk today about how to have what we often call crucial conversations, but in reality it might be difficult conversations, and how we might have them in a way that has a positive outcome, that has a constructive conversation between ourselves and another individual. And as we have these conversations, really want to, again, bring us back to what we've talked about previously, which is this important concept of employee engagement. And we talked about engagement when we talked about this canoe, this way of thinking about how people's actions and behaviors positively contribute towards an organization. And we said engagement, this term, first and foremost, was a positive feeling. And that feeling was characterized by how enthused, committed, loyal, willing to do more than expected I am. And we often add on that last one, willing to do more than expected without an expectation of conversation. And we said we have some folks that are actively engaged, illustrated in this picture of people with the paddle in hand, paddling like heck every single day, i.e. helping to move and advance our organization. We talked about folks that might be going along for the ride. While they might not be directly hurting us, they're certainly not helping us. And where they really impact the organization is they're really asking for the greens to tow them along, to do all the work as they just go along for the ride. Where we're really going to focus today is on the reds. People who are not only not helping us, not going along for the ride. These are individuals that are deliberately, consciously, knowingly punching holes in the hull of this ship. Not having a bad day, not going through a tough patch, not struggling with something. These are people who are knowingly, consciously, deliberately punching holes in the hull of the ship. And we want to have that conversation today about how we can have a conversation with these folks about these behaviors. And so Ben has joined me today. Ben has 30 plus years in emergency medical services, starting as a volunteer, working his way up through the ranks, and excited to have him join and be part of our interaction today with you. And we really want this to be very experiential rather than just going through a slide and saying, well, if this happens, do that. We're actually going to do it. And we're going to see how it goes. Ben is going to be our best behaved employee today. So you can already see the smile on his face. He's looking forward to his part in our conversation. We also talked in a previous webinar about how employee engagement connects into other important aspects of our organization. We focused on organizational performance. We talked about leadership, culture, and employee engagement. And then in a recent webinar, we talked about professionalism and specifically how maturity shows up. And so bringing those together today and then saying, well, how are we going to do it? How will this happen? And so we're going to do this, and we're going to Use a particular scenario. The scenario will be the same. And Ben will do his best to really show us 5 common behaviors that we see from folks when we need to have these conversations with them. I will do my best to have the conversation with Ben. At some point, one of us will call time and we'll talk about it. What maybe worked, what didn't work. What have we learned to be some best practices and how to handle these specific conversations? And you'll notice a theme emerges in all 5, and we'll call out that theme here after this first one. It's the core of what the other person might do. Now, let me again reemphasize that what we're really working on today is this person who we call the red, whose actions and behaviors knowingly, willingly, consciously is punching holes in the hull of the ship. And so these can sometimes be difficult. There might be emotion, there might be manipulation involved. Not a green who maybe we just have to provide a small tweak about something. Maybe a yellow, we need to be clear about the expectation if they weren't clear, or maybe we're inquisitive about why they've set down their paddle when it felt like before they had picked their paddle up. So we're really focusing on those reds. We talked in a previous webinar how we spend, unfortunately, 80% of our time on 20% of the people. So Ben, before we dive in, is there anything you wanted to add as we lay this foundation before we dive in and work on the 5?
No, I think we're good. Let's do it, and we'll certainly unpack it and talk about it after each one.
Good. Hey, Ben, I really appreciate you coming in today. I needed to talk to you about a complaint I received from a transfer that you took yesterday.
Which one?
I think it was around 5:45 a.m.
Yeah, the transfer that was 15 minutes before my shift change, that one?
Well, it was during your shift, yes.
Yeah, the one that I was off 2 hours late as a result of that one?
So I received a call from the director of nursing, and her staff reported to her that you were rude.
Oh my God, I was not rude to her. I'm sure it was at Jill, because Jill complains about everybody.
Doesn't matter who. They said that you asked them, do you know what an emergency is?
You know, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I can tell you one thing. I can guarantee I wasn't rude to them, whatever they define as rude.
So, Ben, this is something we've talked about before. I mean, this just has
Yeah,
to end.
we have talked about this before.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, because you say this has to end, and
Yes.
I agree. At what point are you going to start talking to these hospitals about not calling us 15 minutes before shift change?
What do you mean talking to the hospitals about, and I meet with these folks on a regular basis.
You keep talking about how you meet with them, but nothing ever changes. So, and when is it exactly that you're meeting with them? Because all I know is that you're gone all the time. You never seem to be around the office.
To do with my
You're
travel.
always
When I'm
talking
here in
about
this
being somewhere else and traveling, all doing this other work, but you're never actually around. If you were here once in a while and doing the things that we asked you to do.
So if we call a pause, my first question to all listening in is, did this feel familiar? Did you attempt to have a conversation with that? Oh, I see some hearts. I see some laughing. I see some thumbs up. So, of course, I would ask the rhetorical question. I'll ask Ben. Hey, Ben, was I in charge during this conversation?
I certainly don't think you were in charge. And some people might suggest I'm in charge. I might suggest that neither of us were probably in charge.
And of course, now when you leave today's conversation, you clearly know the expectations for behavior. You clearly know the consequences for your behavior, right?
Yeah, so let me ask the group. If I'm one of your reds, and remember how we defined a red, everything they do, they're out there spreading the negativity, the toxicity, the drama. And if I'm a red and I leave this conversation with Aarron, what message am I likely going to tell all of my friends, the other reds in the organization, about how this meeting went? Yeah, often what we'll see is that I basically got the best of Aarron, right? Because in the end, there was a point where maybe you could catch it or not catch it. That there's a point where all of a sudden we weren't even going back and forth debating. We were just arguing, and it got to the point where we're ultimately yelling at each other. And there was something that came up, and I very deliberately said it, and I'm not sure how many of you may have picked up on it. But what was that trigger thing that happened with all of a sudden Aarron stopped and lost all of his conversation in the sense of what he was trying to get to, and we just sat there arguing back and forth. And so if you were listening, it was this part about him always being gone. So as a red, I'm going to try to find that hot button. And if Aarron is sensitive to the fact that maybe he travels or he's out of the office often, I'm going to use that as a way to manipulate this conversation. And ultimately, at the end, were we talking about my complaint at the hospital anymore? Yeah, so this is a real clear tactic of just simply deflecting, and is unfortunately one that often feels very familiar. This idea that the person likely knows something about us, or they know something about what might set us off, and then the easier that they can get to that point of the conversation, the less likely we're going to be talking about the complaint, because now we're just arguing about Aaron's never around anymore.
Yeah, and as I've been watching some of the comments come through the chat, whether or not it's right or wrong for a crew to have to go take this transfer, whether or not leadership has or hasn't done something about these, all of those clearly could be valid. What we want to focus on today, regardless of whether or not Ben is just in his cause, we want to focus on the behavior. This behavior that is hurting the organization, the behavior that's inconsistent with the culture, that's inconsistent with our customer service. So again, I don't dispute, especially depending on your organization and where you're coming from, that there may be all kinds of things that leadership and management aren't doing. But today, what we really want to do is demonstrate how to handle the behavior. So in this particular case, as the argument got going, if I hadn't responded to that hot button that Ben pushed, and Ben is arguing with me, I could say, Ben, I need you to stop. And he may continue to argue. I may say, Ben, I need you to stop. And he may continue to argue, and I may need to say, Ben, stop. Now you've noticed my voice raised a little bit, but when I'm raising my voice, I'm not getting upset. I'm not losing my cool. The JVD's not coming out. The facial flush isn't happening. That one vein on the forehead's not pulsing. I'm simply trying to bring back control. I'm trying to stay in charge. And if that doesn't work, and sometimes it doesn't, right? Ben may just keep going on. If I continue to be in charge, I may say, clearly, Ben, you have a bunch of things you want to say. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you. You have three minutes. The floor is yours. And after you're done, then I'm going to talk for 3 minutes. But I'm staying in charge. I'm not losing control. I'm choosing to maybe use my voice, maybe use my hands. I might even stand up and say, Ben, I need you to stop. Or if he's distracting me off to someplace else, Ben, we're not here to talk about this at that moment. I may need to do a combination, but I need to be clear. I'm not losing control. If I raise my voice and use my hands and stand up because I'm upset, I'm mad, then I've lost control. Ben, anything you wanted to add to the kind of...
Yeah, and I'm looking at the comments, and there's some great comments in there. And one particularly talked about EQ, right? Emotional intelligence. And the important thing about EQ and emotional intelligence is going into this conversation, it's likely that Aarron knows I'm probably a red. And so what do we know about the person, and what do we expect might happen with the behavior? If I'm a green or a yellow, it's probably not going to go this way. But if I know this person's a red, they're going to want to debate. So our own emotional intelligence about how are we going to respond to that, and recognizing we're not going to allow them to get us off topic and not allow them to distract us. And somebody else mentioned just they like the idea of being able to give me some time because maybe I am frustrated about something and we don't disagree at all. But But one of our encouragements is often, let's not confuse venting with disrespect or insubordination or inappropriate behavior. We may often unknowingly say, well, they just needed to vent a little bit. We believe you can vent about a process. You can be frustrated that something's happening, but you don't vent about a person. And in this case, I was kind of attacking Aarron. So that's not venting anymore. So let's make sure that we're not allowing the behavior to happen because we're giving it this excuse of venting. And then the last thing I'll say, because this will affect any of the conversations we're going to role play for you today, is also you need to keep in mind that you may have allowed these behaviors to happen in the past. So what happens if Aarron has allowed this to happen in the past and all of a sudden he wants to make a change? It's okay to just own that and say, Ben, you know what? I've let you talk to me this way in the past, and I shouldn't have, but I did. But I'm going to own that. What I'm here to tell you now is I'm not going to let you do it anymore. So moving forward, we're going to have a conversation, and that could be whether it's swearing, that could be whether it's interrupting, just rude, insubordinate behavior. All the times that we may have allowed this to happen, and now we've decided we're going to make a change, that can be an uncomfortable thing, but our encouragement is just own it. Own it, explain it to them, and move on and let them know you're not going to allow that to happen anymore.
Yeah. Well, let's try another, Ben. So again, folks listening in, our scenario, you will notice, will remain the same, because what we're trying to do is focus on how we respond to the behavior in a productive way, both productive for the employee and productive for the leader and manager, supervisor, could be peer. All of these could be peer conversations when maybe I'm trying to have that tough conversation with a partner or colleague. So, hey, Ben, thanks for coming in today. I needed to talk to you about a complaint I received from a transfer that you took yesterday. It was 5:45 or so in the morning over to St. Mary's. They felt you were rude. Ben, do you not have anything to share? Have I made you mad? I mean, there's no reason why you can't talk. I mean, I hope, are you sad? Are you is everything okay? Gosh, I hope you feel comfortable being part of this conversation. So I'm going to pause this here. I noticed the chat. This is intentional, so Ben's mic is just fine. So if the first one was kind of an anti-management, right? If we were sitting next to each other, you'd see Ben lean in, maybe do the, poking kind of thing. But this one is silence. And hey, Ben, why might you use silence in this conversation?
And I think the part of this is it's still just deflecting the conversation. If I'm as a red, we believe there's a little bit of power that is being held by those who are the reds in your organization. And often it's this control for power. We know that that's a word we don't often like using, but the reality is they feel and act as though they can get away with certain behaviors. And often it's because we as leaders have allowed them to do that. And that gives them the sense of power. And so whether it's not engaging at all as this scenario, or maybe it's just simply the one where they say, you know what, I don't really remember, or I don't really want to be a part of this, or, and so it's the lack of engagement, whether it's simply being silent or just not participating in the conversation. But at the end, there's still a complaint about me that needs to be addressed. And as leaders, are we going to allow that person to not engage in the conversation? So the question I have for you, Aarron, and for others, let's say I'm not willing to participate in this conversation, yet you have an active complaint against me from a customer. Can you move forward with this complaint, this investigation?
Yeah, and I certainly noticed in the chat, one person said you have the right to remain silent. So your organization may or may not agree with you on that point. Employment is a choice. So organizations may indeed have rules and regulations, policies, procedures about whether or not your participation is mandatory or not. And if you choose not to participate, if there would be consequences. But there's even a simpler route. So as Ben was silent, I may have done a couple more productive things. And one would simply be to say, so Ben, I see that you're choosing not to participate. I was hoping that you would be interested in being part of this conversation. We really try hard to make sure that we sides of every story, and today was about getting your side of the story. But you're choosing not to participate, and you have that choice. So I'm going to pause to allow you, if you change your mind, to, if he still chose to remain silent, I would say, Ben, I'm going to move forward with the information that we have. And we will review the information we have. We will then choose to take what action is appropriate with the information that we have. And I'm going to pause there for kind of our role play, because the point being is that silence is another version of deflection. There may be a belief that if the person doesn't participate, I can't do anything. And that's not true. I can move forward with the information I have. It may not be complete, but I'm simply responding to Ben's choice. Now, we will pause and be very clear that every organization may have its own rules, regulations, policies, procedures for this. A union environment may require you to have a shop steward or a business agent involved. The point we want to emphasize is that silence is another form of deflection. I love the word Ben used earlier as another version of power, trying to grab all of the power in this conversation and hold it. If Ben chooses silence, I can move forward. Something else that someone taught me, we use this exercise at our leadership academy and our supervisor academies all the time. And what one person did, because they knew me, a person who likes to talk, fills the awkward silence, they waited me out. So when I did the silence, they just, and I couldn't take it. So you may, if they're silent, you may choose to be silent as well. And after, it felt like minutes, and it was probably 5 seconds, I chose to join the conversation. So I think there's a number of different productive ways, and that's what this is all about. It's not to wrong someone, is to have a productive conversation about an action and behavior. So Ben, what would you suggest as well for the silence?
As I'm reading through so many of these comments, and I love the participation, a lot are saying, well, maybe silence is their way of not getting further in trouble, or they feel like it's their way of not escalating the situation. And I just want to keep us back to the core of this is an employment conversation. This is one of your employees who has now had an incident where there has been a complaint filed against them. And so the question is, are we as the employers going to allow them to not participate in the conversation? And as Aarron alluded to, yes, all of your organizations will have specific policy, procedure, guideline. If you're part of collective bargaining, there's all sorts of factors that we have to piece in here. But will you allow an employee to directly refuse questioning when there's some sort of a concern, whether it's a complaint, a medication error, a guideline deviation, a driving complaint? And so it's part of the Reds overacting behavior about just trying to make sure that they still have the power. Yes, there's going to be so many nuances in all of the individual conversations you may have with folks, but at its core, it comes back to this part is, will we allow that to happen? And somebody had also just quickly alluded to, at one point, do you realize I'm not going to participate, and how long do you let this conversation go? And somebody in the chat said, if they're willing to not participate, at some point you need to stop asking them questions. And we kind of agree in the sense of how long will this go on before we realize we're going to change the kind of tone of the conversation to saying, clearly, Ben, you're not going to participate in this conversation. I'm going to continue to get the rest of the facts. This was your opportunity to present your side of the case. And even if you don't have the authority, empowerment to do discipline or hold them accountable, you simply just say, I'm not sure where we're going to go from here, but I am going to be following up with the next supervisor or manager, whoever that other person may be. It simply just says, I see what you're doing, and we're not going to tolerate this type of behavior. So again, lots of little nuances to this one, but kind of a fun one.
Yeah. And I've also been watching the chat and noticed somebody citing different laws and rules and things, and obviously, but again, what we're simply suggesting is that first, this is about the reds. Okay, let's be very clear. This is about people who have regular actions and behaviors that knowingly, willingly, consciously harm the organization. And we also recognize that there are organizations that have leaders, have managers, have supervisors who are the problem themselves and aren't trying to sugarcoat that. We want to simply give you a tool that if in the conversation silence is used as a weapon, to give you the ability to bring back the distraction or not fall for the distraction, and then to be able to hopefully have a productive outcome. And if the productive outcome is, Ben, clearly you're choosing not to participate, I want to make sure that I offered you that opportunity. You have chosen not to. We will move forward with the information that we have.
There is one other comment I just want to make because it's one that we heard when we were working with an organization. It basically said employment is optional, participation, and this is not. And again, your organizations are all going to have your own individual process for how to handle this. But when we've talked to organizations in large HR departments, that's kind of been their take on this too, is your participation in this is not optional, but whether you choose to continue to be employed with us is. So it's just, again, something to keep in mind, but you need to obviously follow your own organization's guidelines and HR and direction from leadership.
Yes. So let's try another. So Ben, thank you for coming in today. I wanted to talk with you about a complaint I received about a transfer yesterday.
Complaint, really?
Yes, I received a call from the director of nursing, and her staff reported to her that they felt you were rude.
You know, I don't know what I can do with that hospital because it feels like every time I walk in there, somebody has some kind of complaint. Regardless of what I do, I go in there and I try to be happy and smile and greet them warmly. I try to do all those things, but no matter what I do in there, somebody's always seems to have some kind of complaint.
Well, Ben, this is something that's going to need to change. I mean, there appears to be actions and behaviors that are inconsistent with what we expect, our code of conduct, our employee handbook, our policies and procedures.
But again, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And the same thing is now I'm being called into the office to talk to you about it. Yet, like, I don't have any control over this. Like, I can't control if they complain or think that something I said was rude. And I mean, it's just nonstop. There's nothing I can do right around here. It just feels like no matter what I do, what I say, where I go, I'm always getting drug into the office about something. And I don't know why everyone is out to get me. It just like the people in the organization, there's so many people that are doing worse things than me, and yet I'm the one that always seems to get called into the office.
Yeah, Ben, we're certainly trying hard not to make you feel so at risk or so unsafe. I mean, that's not what this is about.
It doesn't feel like that at all. I mean, it's like it feels like you guys are trying to fire me, and I don't understand what I did wrong. I don't know why people don't like me here. I don't know why the hospitals don't like me, but it's like everything I do, I feel like I can't do anything right, and you're just looking for an excuse to fire me.
So I'm certainly see some things coming through the chat. Yes, Ben is definitely deflecting. And what is the style of deflection he's using? If our first was anti-management, right? If they can get under my skin, then all of a sudden I get hot and bothered like you witnessed. And then we have the silence, and I'm not going to, I saw one come through that I completely agree with, but won't read out loud. So yeah, he's playing the victim card, right? Nothing I can do. I'm being picked on. That's true. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We could have another webinar talking about influence and specifically what we often call deal breakers when we have a toxic relationship with the person we're working with, who's working for us, or we're working for them. But exactly, Cliff says it's a victim. He's playing the victim card. And frankly, this is the one that I get the most. I wish in my heart of hearts, when somebody backs the truck into something, they would simply say, I backed the truck into something. I was supposed to have my spotter out and I didn't. Okay, no, we can figure that out. Let's move on versus, while the sun was in my eye and it was this and there was ice on the ground and then the bird came across. I mean, just if you put as much effort into just telling me what happened as you did to the excuses of what happened, we'd fix this thing. So when we have the victim, again, we begin to see that many of these tools and tactics that we have used in others, we can use here. We can say, so Ben, I need to stop you. You're not a victim. We're here to talk about these actions and behaviors. And he may keep going, Ben, I need to stop you. Ben, I need to stop. Or Ben, clearly you have some things that you want to say, and I'm going to give you the floor for the next X amount of time to be able to tell that. And I'm going to listen, and I'm going to jot some notes down. Ben could have even said, hey, Aarron, I think this is a hostile work environment. Hey, Aarron, I'm feeling discriminated with or discriminated. And I'm not trying to downplay those things. He may indeed feel that, and that may indeed be happening. My encouragement is we don't let the victim be deflection. And if they bring up the big words, I want my lawyer, I want my this, then we simply say within the work environment and the work rules that we have, we will finish our conversation about this complaint, and then I will bring you to HR to start the process for a concern, a claim of discrimination or hostile work environment kind of thing. If it's a union environment and they ask to stop and have the shop stirred, I'm sure you have rules that govern that, and you would follow those particular rules. We had one organization that we worked with that as soon as an employee said discrimination, hostile work environment, their HR required that they immediately stop the conversation and then bring them to human resources. And I'm not here to agree or disagree, but the outcome, as you could imagine, in that environment was before Ben walked through the door, or as he just walked through the door, before he even sat down, he would say, this feels like a hostile work environment. I didn't even say, and so the employees simply used it as a form of distraction. Whether it was or wasn't, I don't know, and not here to judge it. Ben, do you have thoughts as well?
Yeah, again, I'm just reading the comments, and there's so many nuances to this, as you can imagine, but a few that are standing out, because I do think it's really important to call this out as I'm reading some of them, and maybe I'm misreading them, but this appearance that maybe Aarron is already coming after me with his mind made up that I've made a mistake. And so what I want to encourage you from at least these exercises is, regardless of how he's introducing the question, the behavior that I'm presenting is the same. And many have said, I'm not taking any responsibility for the complaint. And that's ultimately really where it's about. These are simply just meant to be conversations to get both sides of the story. The very first example, he just wanted to know my side of the story, and I became very anti-management and you're never around and deflecting. And the second, I obviously didn't choose to participate. And in this one, I'm taking no ownership for it. So yeah, we don't disagree that there are ways to maybe introduce these conversations differently, but we're very simply and quickly trying to get to the root of my behavior as a red, and why I'm maybe now deflecting or not taking that personal responsibility. So in this case, this victim mentality is one that often, as Aarron said, shows up. And we have to remain clear that this isn't about everybody complains about me. This isn't that other people get away with behaviors and I don't. I'm simply wanting to talk to you about the complaint that happened. Can you tell me the details? And I'm immediately going everywhere except for those details. I'm talking about how I'm being picked on and everybody's upset. And so we just want to call out my behaviors as the red. And how do we make sure that we have the productive conversation moving forward so that we don't get sucked in to this deflection that I'm trying to achieve?
Yeah, and Ben, such a great explanation. It's similar to a question I was just typing an answer to. Somebody was asking, is it one hospital complaining? Is it many? And so many details. What we are trying to do is, to the best of our ability in this short time frame, is give you a scenario, but if you could for us, focus on his response and the tools we're trying to give you. If you have a response, a deflection response that is an anti-management, a deflection response that is a silence, a deflection response that is a victim, how we might not fall I was going to say victim, fall victim to the deflection. That's the tools we're trying to give you. And obviously then you could apply them to so many situations. Our EMS brain often immediately wants to go to the what and the how and the detail and try to fix it. We want to give you some tools to use when you encounter difficult conversations. This could happen with a patient. This could happen with a colleague. And how, when we find this deflection happening, and it often is in these 1 of 5 ways, we might bring the conversation back. So Ben, let's try another. So we did an anti-management, we did a silence, we did a victim.
Sure.
So, and as was alluded to, we were just with an organization, and they kind of similarly called out what some of you called out. Yes, we should start with a greeting, a check-in with the person, all of that. We have 1 hour with you, and we really have about 30 minutes after the intro and some time for question and answer. So thank you for acknowledging that. But if you would give us the grace to know that we would do those normal pleasantries, professionalism things. So those things have been done. Now we're breaking the ice. So Ben, I received a complaint from one of the hospitals on a transfer that you took yesterday.
Which one?
It was, I believe, the one to St. Mary's. It was about 5:45 or so, I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. What'd they say?
They felt you were rude.
Oh, come on, man. You know me, right? Like,
Well,
have I ever been rude? I
Ben,
guarantee
I
you,
mean,
probably Jill, wasn't it?
well, I mean, I maybe, but I'm not supposed to tell you who.
Right. Well, I get it. So what? You got to call me into the office and talk to me, and then what?
Well, yeah, I mean, as you know, I was recently promoted to this role of supervisor, and this is one of my responsibilities now. And so, yeah, I mean, we need to talk about this.
Okay, but how big of a deal is this really? I mean, do you basically just have to mark down that you've talked to me about it, and then we move on, or what happens after this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I am taking this seriously, and I think you should be taking this seriously as well.
Again, whatever they were complaining about, I'm sure it was foolish. She probably was having a bad day, but it wasn't anything I did. I can't affect her bad day. So, I mean, but like seriously, like, what do you have to do now? Like, where does this go? Like, are you gonna put this in my file or something?
It could go in your file. I certainly need to report to our director of operations.
You're gonna report me for this?
Well, I
Because some random hospital person, come on, how long have we known each other? Seriously?
20 some years.
Yeah, and again, of all the things that we've done together, now this is going to be the thing you're going to throw me under the bus for because some nurse complained about me.
Sorry, I wasn't laughing for Ben but I loved Anne's response. She's like, "Oh my." I've been waiting for bless his heart. No one's used that yet, but I've been waiting for that to come up. So yes, I saw it earlier. He's playing the friend card, he's playing the buddy card kind of thing. And we use this one because it probably has happened to us or is going to happen. Many of us, there we go. Dirk got the bless his heart in there. Many of us have moved into a leadership role when we used to do the job, or we're still doing the job and in a leadership role. And so when we have the friend card, again, we get to use many of the same tools as before. I could say, so Ben, I'm not here to talk about friend. So Ben, I need to get us to focus on the complaint. Ben, we're not going to talk about friend, right? I could say, clearly you want to talk about friend. So why don't you do that? I'll give you the floor. And then when you're done, we're going to come back to the complaint, right? We can use many of these same tools, but just being conscious that when that friend card comes up, we know that, again, it's a form of deflection.
And again, and somebody did ask, and again, just make sure we're reiterating all of these conversations that we're simulating are a red employee. And so, people are, I think, if there's any confusion about when are we playing the green or the yellow, these are all red. So these are the employees that are going to be difficult conversations. The whole core of this webinar is how do we have the difficult conversations, the ones that we know are going to be difficult, likely because of the person and because this person is probably a red. So again, another great clarification. In all of these scenarios, it's probably safe to assume that each of you probably have that person or persons in mind that might fall into the red category. And so this isn't, the good employee that maybe just did get an unfair complaint or something like that. These are the person that they're going in and they're likely generating complaints. They're not acting and behaving like we want them to do. But now all of a sudden, we're trying to have a conversation about the behavior, and we just know that they're going to push back. Several of you have said it, just taking zero ownership or responsibility and willing to say, yep, you're right, I had a bad day. Yep, I was on overtime and I've worked a bunch of shifts. There's zero responsibility, yet us as leaders have to be able to have those conversations. And same as this, I'm playing the friend card. I'm simply trying to deflect the conversation away. I'm minimizing it, as many of you said in the chat. I'm minimizing it and I'm making it into no big deal, but it is. We have a complaint from the hospital and we at least need to do some due diligence. But that diligence is just give me the other side of the story. Tell me what happened. Yet I'm not doing that. In none of these scenarios have I told you the other side of the story. I'm always deflecting the conversation. So this at its core is about how do we make sure the conversation continues to move forward and not get stuck going down that rabbit hole that they're trying to get us to go down.
And I think it was Jason, and I missed your last name, I apologize, who said it very well, which is why not just talk directly with Ben about the issue? And that is indeed our intent, but it's the deflection that often gets us off track. And so what we're hoping to do is give you some skills, some tools that when the red begins to try to deflect away from just having that honest, frank conversation about the behavior, that we can bring it back so that we can do that. Something else.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, so many of you are saying this, and many of you are saying setting some boundaries is so important. And we would agree. Knowing that so many of us probably have made our way through the ranks and now are leading people that we used to be partners with, friends with, all of the above, this might be similar to that first scenario where we just simply say, Ben, I know I've let you talk to me in the past. I'm not going to let it anymore. This might be simply say, Ben, I know that we have a friendship outside of work. This is my responsibility and it's what's expected of me in my job. So while we do have a friendship outside of work, I'd appreciate if you'd let me get through this. Can we do that? And you just have to own it and call it out, or as many of you are saying, setting some boundaries.
And I wanted to take a similar track, Ben, which was several people suggested that maybe when I got that new promotion, that I might need to have that level setting conversation with folks that I have a personal relationship that just says, so Ben, in this new role as captain, lieutenant, supervisor, whatever the title might be, I will have to have this hat on. And that means that there are some things that I won't be able to discuss, maybe conversations we've had in the past. And so maybe Ben and I spend a few minutes just kind of creating some rules for ourselves. So if we're sitting at the Vikings game and he says, so what's up with Jill? I might say, hey, real quick, this is one of those boundaries that we established, is can't have that conversation. Love to talk about all kinds of other things, like, why we didn't leave the backup quarterback in and let the Viking quarterback heal for a couple more plays. Let's have that conversation. But I can't talk about Jill. So we might be proactive and set some of those expectations up early. So we have one more for you, and then want to leave some time if there are questions. There's plenty more that we'd love to talk a little bit about. But let's have our last of the 5 conversations. So as we've done before, it's about the complaint. So Ben, I needed to talk with you about a complaint that came in yesterday for a transfer at 5:45 that you took to St. Mary's.
Yeah, it was right before shift change.
It was.
Yeah, I remember. What about it?
Yeah, so I need to conduct an investigation to gather some information, and I wanted to get your side of the story.
So wait a minute, I'm being investigated?
Maybe that word's a little stronger. Need to be. I need to gather information. I need to get your side of the story.
So you're telling me because somebody complained about me, now I'm in the middle of an investigation. So if this is an investigation, what, I could get in trouble because somebody complained about me without
Well,
even my side of the story?
you're not in trouble. No, don't, no, I just need to, I just
So
need to
you're
gather.
promising me I'm not going to get in trouble.
Well, I'm not sure if I can promise you that, but I'm not in trouble. I'm just trying to get information.
So I take a last minute transfer that burns me by 2 hours. Somebody complains, and now you're saying I could get in trouble. So could I lose my job over this?
So people are certainly picking up the parts. But this, in this scenario, maybe is a little exaggerated, but this is a classic mistake we could make. So let's imagine Ben's driving one of our vehicles, and if you're from the Midwest, and specifically I'm from Minnesota, around this time of year, unfortunately, we hit a few deers with our vehicles. So let's say he does, not his fault. And he comes in the next day and he says, yeah, you saw I rode up, I hit a deer last night. I just, am I in trouble? What I would want to say is, of course not. I mean, these things happen. But what if I find out that right before he hit the deer, he was vaping in the ambulance? Now what do I say after I told him no, he wasn't in trouble? So while my heart wants to make not only him feel better, more likely I want to make myself feel better, my encouragement is, don't promise something you can't deliver. I might need to say, when he asks that question, I'm gathering information. This is part of our process. I'm okay with using the word that I'm conducting an investigation. And when he says, could this, have consequences in the future? I might have to say it might. But right now we're trying to gather both sides of the story and all of those things. I share this because I have said, no, you're not in trouble. And then as we gathered all of the information, they were. And now I have to go back and own my faux pas of saying that. So our heart wants to say that. And in reality, we need to be honest and say, and direct and forthright and transparent and say, we're gathering information.
This just goes, and we have a whole area we could talk for an hour about this idea of investigation versus discipline, and our kind of key thing about there's always two sides to a story. So clearly today we're showing you the negative side of the red behavior, but there's always two sides to a story, and often we may learn something we didn't know. But when we're in the middle of this phase, whether you call it investigation or fact finding, there's something that's happened. We're trying to follow up. We're getting the employee side of the story, and they may ask, am I in trouble? And I think the honest thing, as Aarron is saying, is there may be times we may have to say, I don't know. We're still just gathering the information, but as soon as we get the information, we will certainly be following up and letting you know. And again, as Aarron said, it's difficult because empathetically, we don't want people to leave the meeting feeling like they're at risk of losing their livelihood and their job and all of that. But it is the most honest thing. And again, one of you wrote, promising somebody they won't get in trouble equals lawsuit. And again, it's just, let's not say or share anything that we can't guarantee at the time. And so this could simply be a medication error that you're just simply trying to figure out what happened. And they may say, am I going to lose my job over this? We want to tell them no, but we don't know. We're still getting the information. So this is the hard message as leaders. We sometimes recognize we can't always share the easy message, and sometimes that message is honest, but it just simply says we're still gathering information. Once we have it all, we'll be following up with you again.
So a few key points we want to emphasize here, and again, allow a few minutes for question and answer. And when I say you are in charge, I don't mean you're a dictator. I mean, remember, your job is to create an environment for both parties to have a productive conversation. And that's your responsibility. And that may mean bringing you back on point. That may mean being transparent about what part of the process this is. But your role is to remain in charge and do so in a way that has a productive conversation. Remember that often when we're talking about the reds, that it's often about distraction. Often there might be a number of strategies you have to use together, like I have to use my hand, my voice, might have to, or more. I might have to, be part of the conversation as well. We bring these all together. And these do get better with practice. So the sideways, you might have that nausea feeling in your stomach, you might have the sweaty palms. So we often encourage role playing, no different than Ben and I did today. Is if Ben and I need to talk with someone, one of us will be their most reasonable version of the other person. We don't expect the over exaggeration, but we can practice again so that our goal is to have a productive conversation, not to manipulate the employee, not to play good cop, bad cop with them, but so that we can have a productive outcome. What we need with top-down approach is we need to make sure the people we work with agree with the strategies, agree with the practices. Please don't leave this webinar and go do something that we demonstrated and then go, well, Aarron and Ben said I could. That will likely not go well for you. So it might be something we come back and just say, hey, I learned something on a webinar. I'm curious if that's something that we should do, but we have that conversation with the people that we work for. With more time, we would talk about influence and never blindsiding, embarrassing, or undermining the people we work with and work for. We don't do these typically alone. There would usually be somebody with us, and they would act as simply a witness for all parties of what was said and what was done, or what wasn't said or what wasn't done. And your success is often directly tied to preparedness. Many of you have mentioned that in the comments you put in the chat box. If I know Ben, I know what style will likely be successful, not successful with him. I know how he may respond or not respond. And then I'm going to tailor my conversation that way so that, again, we have a productive conversation. And you got to practice this last one. If I get the complaint and I'm all hot and bothered because of the complaint and I immediately go talk to Ben, it's not going to be successful. I have to separate the stimulus and the response. And if you think you have separated the stimulus and the response, wait 4 more hours, right? Let all that dopamine and corticosteroids get out of the system. You owe it to that other person to have a productive conversation, not bring your emotion, your anger into the conversation. Ben, any closing key points that you want to offer? And then we'd be happy to look at questions that people have.
No, again, I love the comments. A lot of people saying deal with the issue, not the person. Again, we need to get back to the core. If we're trying to figure out the other side of the story, stick to the facts of what happened. We're not debating the facts. We're not arguing the facts. Just tell me your side. And others saying, wait, the 24-hour rule. We do have that in our organization. We often talk about the 24-hour rule. So again, so that we go into it not ready, at the brim emotionally, so that the first time they hit one of those hot buttons of ours, we end up now getting set off. This is just a really kind of quick overview of some of the behaviors you might deal with a difficult employee. That's, again, the whole title here was dealing with the difficult conversations with employees. And so when they're going to do that. How do we make sure they're productive? Not letting them go down the victim mode, the silence, the anti-management, the friend. We need to keep these conversations moving and not leave after half an hour and going, I just sat there and debated for 30 minutes with somebody when I went in to ask them about a complaint. And so how do we as leaders get really good at it? And part of it is bringing awareness to it, getting to see the behaviors and go, you know what, I have seen that before. And how can I make sure next time I don't go down, as I said before, that rabbit hole, and I can keep that conversation very simple and productive?
Yeah. So there's a wonderful question that likely many of us can relate to, and it's about how we have a difficult conversation with a supervisor. And I'm perceiving from the question that either A, we are peers with this individual, or more than likely that this person is our supervisor. So they have rank or authority or a real or perceived power over us. And we would often call that influence. And a longer conversation, and maybe we'll have an opportunity to do a webinar on influence. But our encouragement is to use these same styles, So as you approach the conversation with them, if they start deflecting away from the thing you want to talk with them about, we would use these similar styles, obviously in a way that respects their authority and rank. So if Ben begins to deflect, I may say, so Ben, I was really hoping we could stay on this particular, whatever the item is. And when Ben says, well, you've done that a bunch of times. So Ben, I really wanted to talk with you about, that text message you sent me about the chart that I didn't get completed. Well, you have a whole bunch of charts not done. So Ben, I'm really hoping we could talk to you about, and I'm going to use one of the tactics that I'm going to talk about next, how that text message made me feel. Because when I read it, I felt. So one of the ways that we can talk to folks in this broader concept of influence who we work for or have authority or empowerment over us is to use what we call the language of I. I think, I feel, my opinion is. And so a way to internalize it and hopefully present ourselves in a way that doesn't feel like we are attacking. You did this, you didn't do that. And so we might use something like, I feel, I believe, my opinion is. And again, we might, when they deflect, use some of these same things that we used to bring them back again. And so when they deflect because of this, and the other thing, we can bring them back. So, and love to have a longer, more detailed conversation about influence, but I love that someone brought up how we might do this when there's an imbalance of power. That person might have authority, rank over us, might even be our peer. Ben, did you want to add anything to that one?
Somebody else also had said is how do you make a red and move them into a yellow or green? And that's a whole nother conversation, as you can imagine. But certainly one that is a really important, powerful conversation as we start to identify our organizations and people in the organizations, getting clear about who are the reds just as much as who are the greens so that we're recognizing them as well. But then what do we begin to do about the reds? And again, today is just one little glimpse into how do we begin to make sure that we take back some of the power that they perceive that they have because of their actions and behaviors to let them know that we're not going to allow those behaviors to continue.
Yeah. Another great question about what if I'm a green? At times I'm a yellow, but I get pulled in a conversation and I'm choosing to perceive from the person's question that my boss might have actions and behaviors that we might think of in a red kind of way. And so they drag me into these things, maybe badger me. Again, these were my words, not the person's words. And not surprisingly, I become a yellow or I start feeling like a red. We call those deal breakers. And again, a much longer conversation. And all of this are things that we do in more detail in either our supervisor boot camps or our leadership academies. But we might call those deal breakers. And so what we're saying is at some point in time, there may be lots of things in our life we can't control. I might not be able to control the actions and behaviors of that person I work for or the people that they work for. I might not be able to control the actions and behaviors of that these leaders create in our organization. And here I am trying to do what's right every single day. And I'm feeling beaten down. I'm not feeling valued or appreciated. I'm not feeling worthy. If anything, I'm feeling singled out and punished, maybe even attacked. Deal breakers are simply when we've crossed a line in the sand. And yes, it could be morals and ethics, but those are the easy ones. A deal breaker is simply one that said who I am and how I work best isn't working. And it doesn't mean when we hit the deal breaker, we salt the ground, we burn the bridge, we tender our resignation, we storm out. Deal breaker simply means I recognize that of all of the things going on, thank you for getting to the questions as I automatically jumped into the questions. Thanks for the great team at NAEMT that keeps me focused anyways. So a deal breaker is when I say the only thing left that I can influence is my own actions. And that action might be that I choose to stay in the organization knowing that this is how I'll get treated. Maybe because it's a good close to home and the great school district for the kids, or I'm trying to finish up my paramedic certification or something. Or the deal breaker might be, no, it doesn't work. And I begin to look at when to leave. But if I do leave, I leave on my terms, on my timing. So again, I would love more time to talk about that. But there indeed is the side that was alluded to, which is I may be the green, and because of actions and behaviors of others, I'm beginning to feel like a yellow, or at times I feel like a red, and we would call those deal breakers.
For everyone who attended, may you, your family, and your colleagues remain healthy and stay safe. Thank you for advancing the EMS profession and serving your community.